Good morning, and thank you for showing up so early. Sure. Appreciate it. My name is Brad Weirick. I'm at Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. I'm the co-chair of our Emerging Companies Practice Group, and I represent growth companies as well as traditional institutional investors and corporate investors in growth companies, and do a lot of mergers and acquisitions. We had this panel because we thought it's important to talk a bit during this summit about corporate venture capital. Corporate venture capital is still a huge part of the venture capital ecosystem. There's been some enormous corporate funds formed over the last year. Corporate venture still represents, about 20% of funding in all deals. And some of these funds are as big as ever, bigger than we've ever seen. So this panel, I think, is an excellent group to talk about corporate venture generally and issues that they see in transactions and how they go about their transactions. So what I'll do is initially just introduce each of you briefly and then let you talk a little bit about yourselves and what you guys do. We've got Daniel Docter, who's the Managing Director of Dell Technologies Capital. We've got George Ugras, who's the Managing Director of IBM Ventures. We've got Nagraj Kashyap, who's the Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Ventures. And we've got Meredith, who is the Director of Corporate Development at Salesforce Ventures. So why don't I let you just go down the line and say a little bit more about yourselves and describe briefly your company's initiatives in corporate venture.
Sure, thanks so much. Great to be here this morning. Good morning, everyone. So I'm a director on the Salesforce Ventures team. I've been at Salesforce for 2 years now. We're the corporate strategic investment arm of Salesforce.com, aptly named, obviously, Salesforce Ventures. But strategic really describes how we think about our investment program. We're primarily and almost exclusively invested in enterprise SaaS companies in and around the Salesforce ecosystem.
Great. So hi, I'm Daniel Docter. I'm with Dell Technologies Capital. So Dell Technologies Capital is the venture capital arm for Michael Dell's parent company, which is called Dell Technologies, which owns all of the Dell properties. And to be clear, so Dell acquired EMC. That acquisition closed about 4 or 5 months ago. This group that I'm part of was actually originally the EMC Ventures group, and so that entire group basically was captured by Michael Dell and recruited to be Michael Dell's Dell Technologies Capital. We've been actively investing, so that group has been actively investing for about 4 or 5 years, and we invest across the enterprise infrastructure space, predominantly software.
Hi, Nagraj from Microsoft Ventures, the corporate venture capital arm of Microsoft. We've only been around for a year right now, so we've been investing since last January. And we invest fairly broadly across all of Microsoft's interests, everything from cloud infrastructure to enterprise SaaS, future of work to AI and machine learning.
George from IBM. Our group in some shape or form has been around for the last 20 years or so. I took over about a year ago, and we've made some changes. The fund activity is really focused on strategic imperatives to support IBM's current and future businesses, so it's purely a strategic initiative.
So before we start talking about some of the specifics and issues that arise with corporate venture, I guess I'd like to get your group's perspective on sort of the market generally and exciting areas of investment, exciting areas of innovation that you and your firms are looking at and that you're excited about generally, and anyone that wants to take that.
Well, so I mean, we're a thematic investor, and so we have a bunch of themes, and those themes are things that are based on what we think are macro trends. And then we totally ignore that and invest in anything that's interesting. But we do have themes around, and my guess is if I say this, everyone here will probably say, yep, us too. But artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning is a big theme for us. IoT is a theme for us. Security is a theme for us because it's about 17 or 23 or 117 different things. And then we have another theme around sort of the evolution of the world moving to software defined in every aspect, and also the world moving to everything delivered as a service. So we've got sort of a software defined everything and X, everything as a service.
Dan, you forgot virtual reality as a buzzword, dude.
Sorry, yeah. Actually, that's great, because that's the one that we kind of haven't done. So
Yeah.
we actually not something we focus, but I bet you guys do. So.
No, we don't. Well, well, I do everything Dan said, and when he gives me a call, I jump on the phone and do a deal. That's pretty much it. I mean, this is very common areas, I think, across all of us. I don't think there's anything brand new here, but I think we invest across all those regions also.
Yeah, pretty much. We have this Wheel of Fortune wheel we turn every morning. And, that
Call one
determines
another
our
up.
strategy, yeah, just like VCs. No, it's kind of funny. I was a financial VC for a long time, and VCs spend a lot of time kind of explaining their strategy and all that stuff. And at the end, when you really peel the onion, 80% of the stuff is opportunistic.
Yeah.
Stuff comes in like, I like the CEO. I kind of understand what they're doing. Let's make a couple of customer calls. Looks good. Let's get this done. So in the corporate world, it's a little different than that, because you have these people called shareholders, and they actually want to see some value being accrued back to the corporate. And I think there, obviously, the financial return we generate, unless like you're Intel Capital and you're so huge, you're not going to move the needle in terms of the equity return. So if you're focused on the strategic return, it really does dictate a very deep knowledge of what's actually happening in the business. So. This had nothing to do with the question you asked.
That's fine.
That's okay. I think
That's what you get for 7:30.
Yeah.
Usually one thing we say is we don't typically invest in healthcare so far. We are actually not investors in AR, VR, just and then we don't invest in broadly IoT because it's just too broad. So I think if you look at our website, those three things are absent. Everything else, it's kind of easier to describe what you don't do nowadays. Just
we don't do food tech.
no food tech.
Yeah.
I would echo the same from Salesforce's perspective. Obviously, bringing intelligence into the enterprise is a priority for us right now. I think it maps pretty closely to Salesforce's clouds. So sales, service, marketing, communities, analytics. We do have an IoT cloud, but we haven't been investing heavily there either yet. It's still maturing. But I agree with the panelists. Sort of, it is easier to say what you're not invested in. AR, VR, not a priority for us. We really don't have a product around HR or anything that services really the financial services segment within the enterprise. So I would say those are sort of two areas we're not focused on right now.
I think that's a good segue into a little discussion about what's unique about corporate venture investing, and that is, getting you to talk a little bit about what your real objectives are as investors. Traditional institutional venture capital investors are all in for return, and you folks presumably have alternative motivations: access to technology, access to new customers, building strategic alliances. Nagraj, you want to sort of kick that off and talk about your general perspective and what's different for a corporate venture investor as contrasted with a traditional institutional
Yeah, I
investor?
can kick it off. I can be controversial because I didn't pay attention to your questions. I think the best way to answer that one is you'll probably get a slightly different answer from each of us, because it is unlike, so the label of CVC, we're not all the same. Just like every VC is not the same. Everybody operates differently, and I think there's no right or wrong model. It's what's right for basically your corporation and how you want to do it. So from a Microsoft perspective, we're, I would say, a little different than what you said, and I'll explain why. We actually also optimize on financial returns. And but that doesn't mean we don't do strategic investment. We have essentially sort of a demarcation between early stage investments and strategic investments. And strategic investments are somewhat, I would say, Series D and above, and they have to be coupled with a commercial relationship, and there's a different corp dev group that does it. My specific group does early stage investments, Series A to C/D. We sometimes break the rules and do a seed investment here or there. All of those investments actually have the same bar like a VC would. And I think it's just a different philosophy, because we don't do almost any work prior to the investment from the business unit perspective. We do all our work post-investment. So we move at the same speed as a VC. We'll look at the same return profile as a VC. The thesis there is that we are making bets on behalf of Microsoft where the next innovation is. So if you ask the business unit, that will give you the wrong answer. Because they'll always say, well, I can do it, or I think it's on my roadmap, or what, get many different answers. So by design, we have done it in a way that excludes the BU from the conversation, and which then means that when 4 years down the road the investment goes to hell, which many of them do, we are the ones holding the bag. We can't say, look, that person in the BU said that. When it does well, same thing. We are the ones that are responsible for doing it well. So we have a little bit different thing, but we as Microsoft do both. It's just that particularly the person you invited to the panel, that's me, we do the early stage one, and we look at it just like a VC would do. And we also have a philosophy of the best financial companies generate the most strategic returns, because if you think about it, at the early stages, I'm not deploying massive amounts of capital. I'm doing $2 to $10 million, but post-investment, I'm putting to work a lot of Microsoft resources. Actually, those resources are much more valuable than the money I put in. So if I don't make the right bets, that money goes to waste on the resource side. So that's why we are imperatively looking at, so our team is all funded by VCs, or staffed by ex-VCs or ex-corporate VCs, and we all sort of look at it just like any other VC would do.
Mm-hmm. What about others? Because I know some corporate venture investors bring in the business side at the very front end, and it's sort of like a parallel set of teams. The business folks, taking a look at the strategic fit and the value to the enterprise, separate and apart from the value of the investment.
Yeah.
So
Maybe I can elaborate a little bit. So in the corporate venture world, there have been kind of, I would say, 3 waves. When the whole thing started about 15, 20 years ago, the first sort of CVCs were really looking at it very, very tactically. It was pretty much around ecosystem construction around an offering. I mean, Salesforce is a great example, actually. They've done extremely well in seeding their ecosystem for distribution via their capital for startups. The second wave, I would say, really supported adjacencies. So these were kind of things they might actually acquire as an alternative to an in-house development or an acquisition. The third wave is pretty much what Nagraj described, which is look for the third horizon events that we might not be able to predict. We need to know where those might be coming from, and chances are it's some 2 people in the garage in somewhere, working on that, and let's get access to those. So coming back to IBM, I would say we do 1 and 2 and just a little bit of 3. 3 for us is very much embedded in IBM research, and if you do something there, it really is very close collaboration because we have 3,000 PhDs in 20 countries around the world working on that third piece already. So we work closely with them. On 1 and 2, there have been some very, very interesting examples, obviously, some of them represented here, also outside. For us, those have been really around temporally significant projects at IBM. For example, right now, blockchain obviously is extremely important for us, similar with the Watson platform. So when those things come up, those I see more as temporal because those ecosystems need to be seeded, they grow, and then you got to move on to the next thing.
mm-hmm.
I think our approach is sort of in contrast to the Microsoft approach a little bit. We do bring our product teams in quite early to help us with diligence. Every deal we do requires an executive sponsor, which is typically the GM from the cloud most closely aligned to the partnership case. So we're very driven in each of our investments around a thesis around how Salesforce and the company will work together. Mm-hmm. As we believe a lot of the value that we can deliver is integrating with Salesforce, building upon our platform, selling into our customer base, and we want to make sure that we have alignment with our product teams fairly early on. So we are, we always say sort of first order priority for us is what's the tie-in to Salesforce, what's the partnership case really. Mm-hmm. Second order priority is financial returns. We also think financial returns end up becoming a product in a way of your ability to integrate into and sell into our customer base. Mm-hmm.
Daniel, the same at Dell, or what?
I want to be really controversial here, but I can't. So unfortunately, we operate a lot like Nagraj described, and to get off this question, one thing we say at our firm is we have a saying that losing money has never been considered strategic.
At least for the CFO.
This was
So that if you sort of look inside that statement, you can understand that the thing that drives us is financial performance first and foremost. Because trust me, none of the people up here will be employed if they actually lose money in their investment portfolio. And go and talk to the 300 corporate VCs who started and are not in business anymore. And I know there's about much more starting because there's another cycle, but it is cyclical.
Well, that's the next question I was going to ask is for companies that bring in the business side as a part of the investment decision, then it sort of raises an interesting question as to how, with an investment, you measure the success of that investment. I mean, it may not always be the economic return on the dollars invested in the company. How do you measure investment? I mean, Meredith, in your shop.
Yep. So there's very tangible ways for us to measure it in terms of we have rev share with companies that build upon our platform and are selling through our app exchange. So there's really numbers that we can sort of put behind it in terms of adoption of those integrations, customers that we're working on and with our portfolio companies on collaboratively together. A lot of it becomes a little bit soft, quite frankly, though, and not quantifiable in terms of partnering around a solution that enables intelligence within Service Cloud, for example. We know that sort of is allowing us to move more quickly into an area of innovation than we might be able to internally with our own teams. So there's sort of value there as well. To everyone's point, though, financial return really determines the success of our investments. And so while the partnership case is incredibly critical upfront for us to get the investment done, I think we really view our most successful investments as those that have the ability to provide us with a substantial financial return.
Yeah, I think there is a balance question that needs to be asked also on the other side, which is why would this startup take money from a corporate investor, right? Because Sand Hill Road is, last time I checked, pretty packed. There's not a lot of vacancy. So clearly there's no shortage of financial investors. And that's a question that I think always gets asked, right? Because in corporate VC over the last however number of years, there's been this always adverse selection effect where, only people who don't want to join your club want to join. And I think one of the great things that has happened in CVCs is I think collectively we have figured out that we have an offering beyond dollars to a startup that provide much more value than your typical venture capital firm. Do you want me to say what I think those things might be?
Yes.
Okay. Do you like this? The third, it's good. I'm sorry, he actually tried to get us prepped for this, but this group was, especially Nagraj had a bad attitude about getting on a call. I don't know why. He was actually going to send a robot instead of himself.
A bot? Not a robot is like so 1990.
Oh, just a bot.
Just a bot.
Just put your cell phone right there.
Oh, wait, is this really Nagraj?
Yeah,
I don't know. Dude.
I thought it was.
I'm speaking another panel at the same time.
Really. So
I think you're Sia.
Going back to the question I asked myself, so the way I kind of look at it is three pillars. So one is capital, obviously. Everybody likes money. Okay, so we have that great big balance sheets. We can offer capital. The second piece for us is around platforms. So for us, that means obviously the cloud stack, especially on AI and our data platforms. Those are very important, I think, going forward as to how the enterprise is going to evolve around access to proprietary data sets that make your offering special versus general AI. And then the third bucket is around distribution, which is probably the most interesting thing for a startup, right? In my career of running startups and investing in them, in the enterprises especially, I would say, I'm going to throw a number, disagree with me, 80% of startups I think fail because they don't get go-to-market right. And if you look at the companies represented here, if there's one thing we've gotten right, across Microsoft, Salesforce, Dell, EMC, and IBM, we know how to take things to market. especially at the larger accounts, in the case of Salesforce, obviously, on a SaaS platform. So for a startup, that third pillar becomes very, very important. So then the question is, how do you unleash these onto a startup for mutual benefit? And that's the question I ask when a startup shows up as the first gate. Can I offer you a combination of those three things and create a win-win? And if we can, to make the numbers work is not that hard at the end.
I think that's a fair point. So while we say we invest for financial returns, that is actually the same criteria we use, because we could invest in a company that's doing the next biotech drug, and we wouldn't do it because we can't actually help them post-investment. So while we don't filter pre-investment for fit, we do try to figure out post-investment, can I do GTM, can I do product integration, can I offer something over and above, because it's not the one-time transaction. This is my second gig, so I did 12 years at Qualcomm. And the thing is, these things come back. If you invest and don't help the company, then that sort of gets around and they won't come back. So that is a good filter to have, is regardless of, once you figure out, okay, it's a good company, the next second is, well, can I actually help them? If I can't help them, why am I investing? That just becomes dumb dollars, and then they won't come back, and the VCs will say, well, Microsoft invested, they had all these promises, they didn't actually keep them. So I think that's a good point. It's a good filter for us. We will only invest when we know that we can use Microsoft resources to help them. And I think just going back to the last one on the financial and strategic, I mean, really, as Meredith said, there is really no other way to measure it. At Qualcomm, we had designed this measuring strategic value. So we said, okay, let's do this. Let's count all the companies that we've invested in that are customers of Qualcomm. And then we had this long list, and then we kept that very stand for 2 years. Then every time we did the review, they said, okay, is this correlation causation? If you had not invested, would they not have done business with us? Yeah. It is impossible to say that. It is impossible. So ultimately, the only way to have long-term survivability of a corporate venture capital firm is to make sure the CFO likes you. And you can also survive, because you also have, we had a 12-year run at Qualcomm. We had 3 CEOs and 3 CFOs.
I need to make a quick phone call.
That's basically it. So if you want to survive that, then you want to make sure when the new CFO comes, he or she looks at it and says, well, I don't need to call Nagraj, because look, they're generating lots of money. I don't need to shut it down.
So the chatbot sitting next to me is actually a way better experience than the human further down the line, which I won't talk about. But he's like spot on in terms of this. And I actually think that founders have really evolved. So same here, second gig for me. I was 12 and a half years at Intel Capital. So I've been doing venture capital for 17 years. And founders have evolved in that period of time. Founders have evolved dramatically, and they've gotten really, really smart about what they want and they need from the people that advise them and sit around the table in their boardroom and make investments. And I think, I don't, the fact, like, I think the corporate, get rid of the word corporate. So from a venture capital firm, a VC investor, or somebody that you're going to use an advisor, you're looking for value. And there's many, many different ways to provide that value. I know that, like, we think we provide a value proposition to certain companies. Again, if it's a food tech or somebody in the bio space, we probably don't. So we don't make that investment. That becomes a filter for us not investing, because we don't think we can actually, I can't be helpful for you other than to be generally helpful. But all of us offer, everybody up here has a really specific value that nobody else on the planet offers. Mm-hmm. And that's a value proposition, assuming you need it, assuming you're the founder that needs it. And by the way, that's not the only value you need, because you also need, you need mentorship around leadership skills, and you need somebody who maybe is really good at constructing an early stage company and evolving that. And so, I think all of us, we've either been VCs for a long time. We work with all VCs. We co-invest with VCs all the time. There's a value proposition that they bring, or that some of them bring, or that everybody brings something different. And I think if founders have evolved so much, they understand, I don't need 3 of the same thing, and I don't need somebody who isn't good at anything, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're a corporate or a financial VC, you have to bring a value proposition. And I think founders now know that. Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about how you both compete with and partner with traditional VCs. This is a question that you actually wanted me to put on the list and pose to you. The last one was for you too, because
the last one was for me.
But I think it was co-opted by George.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
But
kind of took that over.
Talk a little bit about that. just how you know, you're out in the market competing for deals with VCs, but you're partnering with them all the time.
I don't think it's any different than any, like, again, so two VCs in the marketplace. You know, there's a co-opetition, right? You compete for deals to win deals, and then you also cooperate and align deals and syndicate deals, et cetera, together. And we don't think of it as any different than that. What we do, we actually, just like I would advise a founder, we actually look at VC firms and think about how we think they can add value as a partner for us in a portfolio company. Some of them add value because of a name brand cachet, right? We understand that that's incredibly valuable. Some of them don't have a name brand cachet, but they're really smart, or they have fantastic connections to, based on their previous life or career, they have a fantastic connection to some corporate entity or something that matters to us or that we think is valuable. Some of them are just really, really good at recruiting people and have a network of recruiting people, because that's like such an important thing for an early stage company. So we look for people that we think are, and it's not VC firms, it's people, so it's partners at VC firms that we think can be really helpful. That's the way we think about it.
And so our model, we don't lead rounds. We're traditionally looking for a financial investor to lead, and then we'll follow with a smaller check. On average, into Series A and B, we're writing $500,000 to $2 million checks right now. So probably about 10% of the round is what we'll take. We don't view ourselves as competitive with anyone, not even anyone up on stage here. At least I don't. Maybe you guys have different opinions.
You guys are so nice.
Yeah, we try to be friends with everyone. But honestly, we're co-invested with Microsoft in things. For us, it's while I agree, we look at who else is around the table with us. And we want to make sure that we're not the only investor delivering value, particularly as we're taking very small stakes, that we want to make sure that the lead investors are very dedicated to the company and have the potential to really deliver value beyond just the check they're writing, and complement where in areas where Salesforce potentially can add value. So for us, we are 100% sort of cooperative and like to collaborate with VCs. I sort of consider other venture capitalists as sources for deals for us. If they're looking to bring on a strategic, and they know it's sort of in and around Salesforce's space, we see a lot of inbound coming in from our friends on Sand Hill.
Yeah, the other thing to throw out there is, I don't know about Dan's situation, but I know, for Salesforce, Microsoft, and us for sure, we also are somewhat connected to the corporate development function in terms of acquisitions. So that typically triggers a lot of discussions with VCs, because at the end of the day, they want to sell their companies to us, right? So I think that's a tremendous channel of interactivity with venture capital investors, because the first thing they want to do is sell you what they got, and then the investment is just.
Well, I think what George is trying to say is VCs will never be won't piss us off, generally speaking.
Right.
There's no upside for that,
right.
because it's really at some point they will let us in because they believe that if Microsoft or Salesforce doesn't buy this company, it'll buy the next one. And this is such a long-term relationship. And even so, I chose this seat strategically because, like yesterday or day before, the people on this side, they teamed up against us, and so we said, I'm going to sit with Dell, which is a good friend of ours.
Party.
But generally speaking, as we talked about, when we talk about financial returns, when you start thinking of optimizing financial return, what you want is, as we talked about, we want Dell to help the company, we want Salesforce to help the company, we want IBM to help the company. So the more people that can help the company that I have invested in, the better it is, because it increases the equity value that we have put money in. So we are completely fine with that. And I think the entrepreneurs are actually very smart nowadays, as Dan said. What they don't want to do is have only one strategic. They're also pretty smart. They say, well, I don't want to have just Salesforce or just Microsoft. I'd be better off having both of them. because then they will compete for business with me. And I think that's sort of the one of the things that even the VCs know, that the entrepreneurs know that. So they will self-select and say, in this space, I would love to have these two strategics. We just we do compete with VCs because we do have 20% of the deals we lead. We actually led a round recently, a Series B round, and the entrepreneur actually came back and said, I want you to put $7 million outside. And it's actually an LA-based company called AirMap that we led. And he said, I want to get, of the $7 million, I want to get 5 strategic investors. And he had a list. He was very thoughtful about it. He said, I want all of these folks to come in because post-investment, I want 2 drone companies, 2 chip companies. He was really, really strategic and thoughtful about it. And he said, leave this much room. I want them in, and I want all of them to sort of help me grow the business. And so, again, this is when we were leading the round, and we left and this is the same thing VCs will do. When they lead the round, the entrepreneur will come to them and say, I want 4 of us, or 2 of us, or 3 of us in the round. They will be accommodating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the way I approach it with, go ahead, sorry.
There's a trend there I think I'm seeing as well around, sort of doing a first close and then opening up sort of a second offering for strategics and really raising what people are calling a strategic round. And we've been a part of that, just looking at the almost 20 deals I did last year. I would say 5 were probably strategic only rounds that were extensions of the initial round. So, you also don't need to think about it as, hey, I'm looking for a financial lead and I want to bring strategics in as part of this round. A lot of people are moving to close the round quickly with a financial investor and then do sort of a follow-on shortly thereafter that sort of pools together a number of strategics, because I do think we bring value to the table. There is sort of friendly competition that you can generate as well by having both Microsoft or IBM or Salesforce or Dell on your cap table.
We don't compete though. Look at that. No, let me. Can I just do a little turn? Okay. So when I was at financial VC meeting with entrepreneurs, one of the questions I always asked is, do you absolutely need this money? Like, I would actually pick the opposite side and argue with them that they should absolutely not take my money. And that's a very important conversation to have with anybody you're going to invest in, right? We can argue why. There is real merit, trust me. As a corporate VC, I do the same thing. The first question I ask when somebody comes to me is not, how can I justify investing in this company? The first question I ask is, why is it essential, and that's the word, why is it essential that capital move into this company's balance sheet to make something work? The answer to that typically lies in looking at the end game that's framed as a vision in the entrepreneur's mind, mapping it to where you are now, with some building blocks in between. And if capital needs to be part of that discussion, then there is a rational reason to do it. And I would say in 80% of the cases, it doesn't. It turns out that the things that are required to make that company successful, achieve that vision, is not really required for you to make an investment. There might be other partnership things to do, et cetera, but it has to be an essential reason, right, to participate in that. Because for a financial VC, it's very simple, right? There are LPs who have expectations that in a 3 to 5 year initial investment cycle, the money goes out. In the 5 to 10 year harvest cycle, it goes back to them. It's a very simple equation. For course, it's a little more complicated because I'm actually using, in our case, Warren Buffett's our largest shareholder, right? Warren Buffett can play the venture class game all day himself with his own money. So I got to kind of explain it differently.
Yeah, we have a shorter version of that. So one of my partners asked the entrepreneurs, so if Microsoft gives you money, what's your plan for world domination? If the answer is not good, then we don't invest.
World domination, really?
That's basically.
I'd like to shift the focus a little bit to the perspective of entrepreneurs and founders approaching you seeking capital. And maybe this raises more controversial and interesting topics, and that is, how do you address the concern that a founder might have approaching a corporate about maintaining confidentiality, potential conflicting interests between their business and your business, whether you guys can move as fast as institutional investors, whether the company, after taking your investment, is going to be perceived as captive, or whether you are going to be seeking a right of first refusal on the company that puts some cloud on their exit paths. What do you say to that? Meredith, you want to sort of kick off on that?
I think the structure of our investments really sort of allays some of these concerns. We also have a fairly sizable portfolio now of 180 active companies. We've invested in over 250 companies over the life of our program. And so there's a great track record, that I think also helps sort of allay some of these fears. But we're typically taking 5 to 10% ownership stakes. We don't take board seats. We very rarely take board observer roles. We're not looking to seek control via these investments. We're looking to influence development on our platform, influence sort of partnership with our teams, assist these companies in hopefully co-selling to mutual customers. But for us, the fact that we're not asking for ROFRs, we've sold companies in our portfolio to pretty much everyone up here. We're really not looking to block an exit, to the point that we also want to see a financial return, and that is an important metric of success for us. We will certainly get involved in processes where there's an interest in acquiring a company, but I think we have a great track record right now, and really entrepreneurs aren't afraid to come to us. If their concern is, Salesforce will block us from an exit to a competitor. I think on the product side and confidentiality, it's hard. We're all very large companies. It would be nearly impossible, and I think I'm the smallest company of all of us up here. It would be nearly impossible, for us to truly steal someone's idea. We're truly looking to sort of collaborate and are approaching our conversations in that way. I think our product teams are very aware of that as well. We know we can't build everything, and that we need to partner with people. So we're not approaching these conversations to try to seek ideas from others on how we can make our platform better. But rather truly approach it as a partnership. And part of that really comes with being able to sort of show people a track record of, like, we're not stealing your ideas. We are really looking to partner together. There's not really necessarily a reason to fear us. And then I think sort of having non-controlling interests, not taking a board seat, also really limits our influence at the end of the day.
Well, if I were to be polite, I would say it's a very dated question. But since I'm not polite, I would say it's a very dumb question. Founders are smart and evolved, and frankly, it's a little bit of an IQ test. If a founder comes and asks me that question, I'll probably, decide right then and there that I'm not interested in doing
But
that.
you still hear the question, I assume.
I think we do hear the questions, or actually we don't hear the questions. And I'm trying to make a point. If anybody really believes anything that you said in your question, then they are not an evolved founder. They're living in, 1970s or something. Yeah, or Australia or something like that. Although, I don't know, they may have
What's wrong with
evolved.
Australia? dude?
Yeah, oh, that's right. So let's pick something else.
You can't pick it up with my accent?
Is that where that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
In New Zealand.
I think you heard everybody up here, as an example, I think you heard everybody up here say that they're financially motivated. So if I'm financially motivated, then, and you're financially motivated, then we're aligned. And why would I want to do anything to change that?
Yeah, I actually have put an NDA in front of a founder startup myself from the other side. So take a different position. So it really depends. So look, if you're doing a SaaS investment around code distribution, something like that. What Dan said makes a lot of sense. But if you're doing something really tech heavy, so we obviously are very deep in AI, quantum computing, right? And there are some crown jewels there in terms of intellectual property in flight for a startup and for IBM that need to be mutually disclosed for us to figure out jointly how we'd make something happen. In those cases, for mutual protection of the parties, especially if I
That has nothing to do with investment.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, yeah.
I mean, to Mr. Nagraj's
but
point,
private investment,
it's like
though.
if, at Qualcomm, it's like, hey, would we have done business with you or not? Shit, we would have done business with you
would do it,
anyway,
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and we would have
But
signed
even
an
in those
NDA,
cases,
we would
you
have
would
had to go
sometimes-
through
you
all
would
that. That's
sometimes
a different story.
Yeah, I think what we do is,
nothing to do with
to
investment.
George's point, we will never sign an NDA.
You Australians.
Yeah.
We will never sign an NDA from an investment perspective. Post-investment, we'll say if the company wants to disclose something that they want to, under NDA,
Absolutely.
you can sign an NDA with the company or the business unit, and that's up to you. We will make the introductions. But as a VC, no VC signs an NDA. We don't sign an NDA.
Yeah, that's from an investment standpoint. I wanna be
Investment, we
clear.
don't
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, yeah.
But post-investment, we make the business unit introduction. If they want to at that point mutually sign an NDA,
Great.
that's up to them. That's great.
Yeah.
And to Dan's point, really, there is a lot of self-selection going on, which is why only smart entrepreneurs come to us. Because it's not, if you think about the VC incentives, maybe some VCs in the room, they want their 20%. There is no reason they want to give up 20%. The calls we get are from the entrepreneurs telling the VCs, you need to cut back to allow Microsoft in, which means they've done the homework and basically come to the conclusion that Microsoft Ventures, when they invest, will not harm them. If they haven't come to the conclusion, they won't come to us. And really speaking, very few times are VCs showing us the good deals. We have to find our own good deals,
Yeah.
or the entrepreneurs come to us. The VCs will typically send us deals
And
that
it's
are not doing well.
It's evolved founders who
Yes.
recognize the value proposition that they can't get anywhere else.
They can't get anywhere else, so they'll come to us and they'll actually very, very, very specifically tell their VCs, I want this corporate in my cap table. And that means they've done all the work, and that's why I don't think it's an issue anymore.
Yeah, that's a puzzle actually that hasn't been sorted out in the industry yet, in terms of VCs seeing the value of corporate VCs beyond leading to acquisition. I think it's evolving. Go ahead, sorry.
No. I also think that ultimately we all represent exit opportunities
Yeah, right.
for our portfolio companies and for the companies that are speaking to us. It's in your best interest, quite frankly, to share information with us. So Salesforce Ventures is part of Salesforce's larger corporate development team. We don't do M&A ourselves on our team, but we sit alongside M&A. So really developing that relationship, being transparent, communicating to us how your business is doing, what you're building, how it's differentiated, it is really sort of critical, I think, to building that broader relationship, whether it ends up in an investment or ultimately in an acquisition with the companies.
You mentioned that you don't take board seats. Is that pretty much true across the board with you folks?
So our usual, generally folks, I'm sure Dan has the same philosophy, which is when we lead, we take board seats.
Okay.
When we don't lead, we take observer seats. And what many times we'll also do is, look, when we take board seats, it's not like I specifically want a Microsoft person on the board. If you think of step back, what are we trying to do? We put in the most money in the round. We want to protect our interests. So we will also be open to saying we can put somebody else who's not a Microsoft person on the board as long as we can protect our interests. Because financially, we want to protect the interests of the other classes don't overrule us in transactions that are adverse to us from a financial perspective. So we're very open to saying we need the board seat if you're leading, but we're okay to say we will not put Microsoft because Salesforce might get pissed off to say, hey, we got a Microsoft person on the board, I don't want to do business with you, just in case. So we'll say, okay, that's fine. We'll put somebody else on board, but we will take board seats when we lead. That's a requirement.
So how do you deal with
We're the same.
the conflicts that can arise when you've got a director on the board and there may be conflicting duties between that person's role at
But there's no conflicting duty.
There can be.
No. When you're on the board of a startup, your fiduciary duty is to the startup. It is very clear. I mean, there's nothing conflicting about it.
Well, there may be corporate opportunities that arise and a question as to where that belongs with your institution or with the company you've invested in, and there are ways to address those. And so I'm sort of
So
curious.
first of all, we got good D&O insurance. Second, I think we're very, very careful about those things. I mean, I think
Right.
if you're on the board, it is very clear. And so what you would do is either you recuse yourself If you think there's a specific conflict, you'll say, look, I don't want to be part of this conversation, I'll recuse myself, and that's fine.
Right.
And we actually get that even when you're an observer. Many times you'll say, okay, look, we're talking about Salesforce, or we're talking about somebody else, we want to be out of, that's fine with us. So either we'll recuse ourselves, the company will ask to refuse, but ultimately, if you're a board member of a startup, your fiduciary duty is to a startup. It's very clear. I think there's really no.
No, that's right. That's right. And managing information flow, I assume, is important, right? I mean, if you get information as a director, that's information shared to you in your fiduciary role as a director.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas there may be a separate flow of information on the business side, and a separate flow, I assume this is how you structure it, in terms of your shareholder report.
Yes.
That your shareholder group or your investor group receives. And so what, I assume you've got policies in place to
we
manage
don't.
that?
So we have a couple policies. You're exactly right. So the board material information, anything like that from the company, we don't share. There's no need for us to share that with anybody. So that stays within Dell Technologies Capital, right? So our group, just like it stays within a venture capital firm. When we actually talk to our companies and they'll say, hey, I would like to talk. I would like to talk with this or send this information to a business unit, one of the business units. We actually say, great. You are in control of that. We don't. You send what you want to send to them, because I don't want to be the guy that has sent material to them. So it's really simple.
Yep.
It's
So
the same
so
thing.
that means you are in control of what you send. I'll tell you who to send it or where to send it or where to put it or whatever, but you are the person who ultimately controls that.
And the BU has no need to know about the financial information.
Yeah,
They don't. What we do have is we have accounting teams that need to know whether to mark down the investment, and that obviously we need to share financial information with them from an audit and accounting perspective, but the BUs don't see that information.
Right. I think we should take a little time if folks are interested to pose questions to the panel. I think we only have a few minutes left, so right there.
Do you as a investor value patents going forward? You've got these startups, they're investing with all these lawyers. After so many years, you get all these patents. When you sit and look at a company, does it matter?
A lot of us are software investors. It's kind of hard. You don't look at patents from a software perspective, but if you, like to George's point, so if you're doing something very deep in quantum, I'm sure that's applicable. That's a very small percentage of our portfolio. That's basically what it is. So that I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, but for the, I would say 98% of the cases when we're investing in software companies, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, 100% agreed, because we've seen that what's more important is your ability to actually take a product to market versus having defenses against sort of competitors in the space. So if you can successfully bring the product to market, in many ways that can become your defensibility.
So the one thing we do look at in the technology deeper areas is the freedom to operate piece is very important. So I mean, right now my team is deep in a couple of technology areas where that's very, very important for us, because we don't want to be involved with a company that's going to be sued later on, et cetera. But these are very deep technical areas, not a SaaS play.
Yeah, generally speaking, VC dollars not the best use for legal cases. I mean, we don't like our dollars to be used to fight, so it's generally.
But you're corporate.
It doesn't matter. As we talked about, we're actually, so a lot of times, I think of it as like this. If Dan puts a term sheet for your company, and you take out the name Dell Technologies and you put Lightspeed, or whatever you want to put it, I would tell you, in almost all the cases, there's no difference.
Correct.
So when I lead, we take out Microsoft and we put some other company's name, some of the VCs, the terms are no different. So you should expect the behavior to be no different.
Well, that's not 100%. If Dan puts money into a company and then that company grows, HP probably won't be interested in a corp dev.
That's not true at all.
That's not true at all.
You're kidding me?
No, that's not true. No.
Board members will say when you ask about a strategic
Especially HP, because they're not presented.
No, it's not
board
true.
members will say, well, if you take it from that strategic, you're kind of limiting yourself for M&A, because that is a comment that I have heard, and I'm just,
I think it's rare, very rare now. I mean, those things.
Yeah,
are
I don't
going
think it
up.
happens anymore.
that's a 1970s question.
That's a 1970s comment, or
No, that could be 80s.
remember, everybody's positioning too. So I mean, I think everybody's positioning meaning the board members and investors are positioning. Because it's in their self-interest.
So to be fair, to be fair, the folks represented in this room and many of the folks we are talking about are, I would say, in the top 20 CVCs. I would say that practices start becoming a little bit more, I would say, 1970s once you go past the top 20. So you can hear that if you're going to take money from a corporate that does one investment a year, and their corp dev folks get involved, their lawyers get involved, they want all rights. So once you drop off the top 20, I think there's a big cliff, and you'll get to 1970s. But why would you go there? Why?
One more question.
I have so many, but I worked as a VC, a traditional VC for most of my career, and I just joined a CVC in Australia about a year ago, National Australia.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like a kid in a candy shop, because as a corporate VC, you can get in and talk to any company compared to a traditional VC, so it's great. But when I was on the traditional VC side, it seemed to me, and this was a while ago in the US, that all corporate VCs were trying to get out of corporate VC and get into traditional VC because of the carry. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if you can disclose this, but how each of your files has handled the question of carry? Because a lot of times it's not just the venture firm that's adding value to the company, but there's so many people in the corporate adding value and how that's worked.
Yep.
You touched the third rail, so I don't know how many. Of
Yeah, that is. You just touched the third rail. I'm starting to have seizures now. And the bot next to me is eager to talk.
Sorry, I think.
Yeah.
I've been talking too much. We'll have Dan talk now.
Dan is willing to disclose everything.
What does HP
I
do?
did his taxes last year. What does HP do? Where are they?
Does anyone know what HP
Where are
does?
they? Huh?
I'm not sure.
It's new. They just joined. There is no, so, look,
Well, are you all trying to jump out? I guess that would answer the question.
No, we're not. We're not. I jumped from one corporate to another corporate, so
fine.
I love it.
But do your firms provide the same incentive that you would get in a traditional?
I think okay. So I did take media training, and what they told me. No, the one thing I got out of there, they said, if you get a tough question, you don't feel obliged to answer it. And by the time you start talking, people have forgotten the question. So I think hopefully you don't know.
yeah, why are you being so persistent about this?
No. Okay, no, I'll tell you. So I will answer your question. There is different ways to incent people. So I would say that folks like us, we've had long tenures. So in Qualcomm, I had a group of 25 people, and I had 24 of them stay for 8 years or longer. And at Microsoft, we have hired people from Trinity, from just VCs, and they've come for different reasons. And some of it will be there's compensation. There's some there is freedom to do things they couldn't do. And the fact that we could look at one day a chip company and another day a SaaS company, and we can do anything in between. So you've got degrees of flexibility, you've got comp, there's many different axes, and so we can optimize and self-select who you want to be with. I really enjoy doing this. And whether I have 20% carry or I have 18 or 16 or I have no carry, I think that's just a matter of discussion.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think I think maybe we're motivated a little bit differently, but I think we also all have an appreciation for the value that we're able to bring to companies beyond just writing a check. And so for me, that's incredibly satisfying, an incredibly satisfying part of my job, that you want help with pricing. Like, I can bring in our pricing expert, right? I can literally draw people from around the organization to sort of help provide expertise. I took a pricing class, in business school. I am not a pricing expert, but Glenn on our team is. And from my perspective, that opens up a lot of opportunities for me to look at. Quite frankly, I'm also doing many more deals than a traditional financial VC would. Maybe you're doing 1 to 2 a year. Like I said, I did almost 20 last year. So I get to see a lot of things, work with really interesting people. It's very dynamic. It's a little bit different than I think a sort of traditional venture role, and comp is only a part of your job.
I think Meredith wins
Well,
that
I can bail you all out
I think
on
Meredith
this
wins that
question
round.
because we just got
Okay.
cut it
yeah,
off.
yeah,
So you're all
that's
you're all
right.
off the hook
All right.
now.
Okay,
But thank you very much. I think it was a good
Thank you.
discussion.
Yes, thank you very
And
much.
Thank you, everybody, for getting us so early.